Thank you, everyone. Great to be here and great to see you all here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the past, the present, and the future of the cloud, and especially how it relates to how we access the cloud and the devices that we use to access the cloud. So I'm going to start with the past. This is the very, very old Google Apps logo. And so 10 years ago, right now, this week, we were doing our very first customer pitches of Google Apps. And I remember it very distinctly because I flew to New York with a little more than a slide deck with the idea of talking to a bunch of CIOs and trying to convince them to move their email to our data centers. And the cloud wasn't even a concept, really, at the time. And people talked about things like SaaS, but the cloud really wasn't a concept. So we went up and down Manhattan with about a dozen customer visits. And I will never forget the very last one. So we walk into a big company, go to the boardroom, and talk to the CIO of this big company. He walks in. I go to slide number 1, start to talk about the concept of what we're talking about. And he stops me on slide 1, and he says, OK, let me understand this. You want me to move my data to your data centers? I said, yes. And so he said, he thought about it. He gave me a quizzical look, and he got up, and he said, I'm sorry, not interested, and just left the room. And I was, relatively young product manager at the time, and I was just stunned. My brand new product here, the guy didn't want it. Nobody wanted it. And so I kind of started thinking, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe this thing isn't really going anywhere. What have I gotten myself into? Well, turns out it wasn't that crazy. And turns out this cloud thing may have a future here as well, too. But in all seriousness, it's amazing to see kind of in the 10 years that's passed how much the cloud has evolved. It's gone from something that's been on the fringe to something that's mainstream. And we've gone from the concept of thinking about what can you do on 1, 2, or 3 servers to what can you do on 1,000 servers or 10,000 servers or 100,000 servers. And that is, it opens up a whole set of new possibilities. One of the most profound transitions, though, has been in the devices that we use to access the cloud. So I think about that meeting 10 years ago, and we were all walking in with laptops, and all of my data was on that laptop. If I lost that laptop, I wouldn't be able to do any work anymore. Whereas now, we move from device to device to device. We can have low-powered handheld devices where I can access all the world's information. I can access every email I've ever written, every document that's ever been shared to me, every photo I've ever taken, every song I've ever listened to. Things like that are just absolutely astounding, and it's all because of the cloud. And so the question is that now where do we go from here? And how do we make it such that everybody has access to the cloud? So the question I want to pose to you is, what would happen if everyone at your business had access to the cloud at all times? And when I say everyone, I don't just mean the people with desks. I mean every employee. And I don't just mean every employee. I also mean, what about your customers, too? People that might walk into a storefront, for example. What would happen if everybody had access to the cloud? So imagine if that were the case. So I'll take an example which you just saw. Imagine if every student in a school had access to the cloud at all times. You could transform how a school works. You can take curriculum and you can cater it to the needs of every single student. You can actually bring in interactive content that would be incredibly engaging for a student. And we've seen this now happen, where test scores are going up, where engagement is going up, and students are learning in a very different way. Imagine if you had a store, and in that store, every customer that walked in and every employee had access to the cloud at all times. The customers can walk in and have engaging experiences with kiosks, for example, where they can access all the information they need to research their purchase. They'll know about things that are on your shelf and things that may not be on your shelf. And they'd be able to make a purchase decision and actually build loyalty and engagement in a much better way. Your employees will have quicker access to knowledge of anything that they need and be able to serve the customer better. And processes that used to be on paper can now be automated. Things like everything from HR processes to time cards to shift scheduling can all be automated processes. Things like that can really transform a business and create business value. But the truth is that that's actually not what's happening right now. So there are about 3.2 billion, 3.25 billion workers that walk into a workplace every single day. But about 75% of those workers don't have a desk. And there are only about 750 million PCs in business today, too. And as much as we talk about the smartphone, even though there are almost 2 billion consumers that have smartphones, there are only about 300 million managed smartphones in businesses today. And so we need to do more to try to make that vision take root, to bring the cloud to more people. So this is really what we've been thinking about with our device platforms. And so Chrome OS and Android, the great thing that we've been able to do is we've been able to grow up in the age of the cloud. These operating systems were started in the age of the cloud, so we could design it from the ground up with the cloud in mind. And as a result of that, we can extend it to the future of where devices are going. And that future really falls into 3 buckets. And this is what we're focusing on in terms of how do we actually evolve our products. The first is mobility for all. How do we bring the idea of mobility to every single user? Second is redefining the concept of productivity. The PC is something that is evolving extremely rapidly, and it's still very important, but important in a very different way. And I'll go into kind of what that means. And the third thing is beyond mobility. How do we actually go beyond mobility and actually start to bring this to new devices that are very different? So first part about bringing mobility to all. The key lesson here is that one size doesn't fit all. You can't just have one type of mobile device that is the same for everyone, that you might give, for example, to your CEO, but then you also might give to, for example, somebody on the shop floor. And this is the thing we've really focused on with Android. How can we have the operating system be the same, but how do we make it such that there are a plethora of devices that are out there? So with Android, the great thing we have is we have almost 1,000 OEMs that are actually building devices of all kinds of various types. And these are just a few of the examples that are there. And there are, very, very premium devices. There are inexpensive devices. There are tablets. There are big phones. There are small phones. There are rugged devices. All kinds of things that would actually make it such that it fits the particular business need that you have. A great example of this is this contrast right here. So on one side, you have the Nexus 6P, which you all got today. We took care to put the most premium materials in there, the best possible camera we can find, the best possible display we can find, making it such that it's an incredible experience for the top end user. On the other side, you have a phone that DeWalt produced. And DeWalt, as many of you know, produces construction tools. But they actually also produced a phone. And this phone meets the needs of what's needed for a construction worker on the job site at a particular time. This is the kind of phone that you can drop from a building and it'll be safe. You can dump it in a vat of water and it'll be safe. It has a set of peripherals on it that are needed for the construction site. For example, you'll be able to actually do measurements using this phone. Things like that are very specific to that need. And with Android, you have that plethora of areas out there. This is the kind of area where we're looking forward to evolving. How can we meet the needs of more employees? We're very excited about the partnership we announced earlier today with Accenture in mobility, that we can now start to go after very specific use cases and start to bring mobility as a much bigger part of those use cases. The second part is how do we redefine the PC? And so one exercise that we took is, if we redefine the PC, what would it be? If we had to start from the ground up, what would that be, and how would we look at it differently? So the first 3 things we thought of is that it needs to be fast. You need to be able to get into what you're doing very quickly and start being productive. It needs to be easy, and it needs to be secure from the very get-go. You shouldn't have to be worrying about viruses and playing whack-a-mole with viruses. It should just be secure from the get-go. And so that's how we designed Chrome OS to begin with. But then 3 other things. We thought it needed to be shareable. Because in a world where you're using many devices, you may not want to give a PC to every single person. You want to make it such that you have a bank of devices that people can use whenever they need to. You want to make it get better over time. The wonderful thing about the cloud is that it just gets better over time. Gmail, we'll ship a new feature every single week and make it better and better and better. Why isn't your PC like that? It needs to be like that. And the last thing is it needs to be versatile, meaning that you need to be able to use it as a mobile device, but you also need to be able to use it as a productive device. It needs to switch whenever you need to. So two aspects I want to drill into a little bit. The shareability. This has been one thing that has really made Chromebooks very, very successful in US schools. And so Chromebooks now represent about 60% of the devices that are in US schools. And we've seen an enormous amount of impact there. But the way that that started is a teacher would buy what we call here a Chrome cart with about 30 Chromebooks, roll it into the classroom. When the class starts, student would go and pick up any Chromebook, open it up, log in, and within 5 seconds, they're into their applications. They do what they need to do in the classroom, return it at the end of the class. The next class walks in, and then the next set of students pick that up. So within a day, you might hit 180 students with the same set of 30 Chromebooks. And so scenarios like this really open up the possibilities of what you can do with even less budget. So a great example of this is East Leiden High School. So East Leiden High School did this with their science classes in Chicago. And they now are using Chromebooks to let their students be able to actually design artificial limbs and be able to actually then go and produce them. And so it's the kind of experience that I know I never had in school, but is now possible because of the technology that they have there and the fact that every student has access to that technology in that science class. But we're now starting to see this within businesses as well. So a great example of this is what we're doing with Charles Schwab. So Schwab had a problem where they wanted to bring more devices into their branch offices. And they also wanted to have it such that those devices would be very easy to manage and low cost, and have it such that they could use it, but they could also have their customers use it. So they brought Chromebooks in. And what they're doing with it is that when you walk into a Schwab office and you want to actually open an account, rather than handing you a stack of papers, which we're all used to, they'll hand you a Chromebook. You open it, and you actually have your own private secure session. You'll be able to fill out the information right there securely, submit it, and you're done. And there's no manual process that needs to happen. And so they found that it's more satisfying for the users, and it's actually a lot more efficient for them. That's just one example, but they're actually now able to share that Chromebook between customer to customer to customer because of the shareability of Chrome OS. So the second thing I want to emphasize is this idea of mobile productivity. So when you think of kind of the devices that are out there, a lot of times you have to choose between either being mobile or being productive. And so you have tablets out there that have a vast array of mobile applications, but then they don't have the ability to really be productive, have multi-windowing, multitasking, be able to let you do a lot of things all at once. Or you can choose a PC where you're very, very productive, but you don't have those mobile applications that are out there. And so this is kind of the next frontier that we're going after with Chrome OS. We announced last week that Chromebooks will now have Android apps running on them. And the entire Google Play Store now runs on the Chromebook. So the 2 million plus apps that we have out there will run on the Chromebook seamlessly. And so what this opens up is the possibility for many more types of devices that can be both a mobile device and a productive device. So this is an example of the Chromebook, the ASUS Chromebook Flip, where you can turn it into a tablet and you can turn it into a laptop. When it's in a laptop mode, you have multi-windowing. You can do all the types of desktop applications you want. With things like virtualization, you can be able to access Windows applications as well. But then you flip it into a tablet, and you have all of the great Android applications that are out there that make it a great mobile device. And so it's no compromises. Lastly, how do we go beyond mobility, and what do we do there? So our first thing we're doing here is how do we light up every screen in your business? And so I'll give you another example of this. So this is an example from a convenience store. You'll notice the board up there is an ad. And it's a promotion that they have in the store. We've now made it such that it's easier to make that a digital sign, and it's actually cheaper to make that a digital sign than to make it a paper sign. We released this thing last year called the Chrome Bit, which is an $85 little dongle that you stick into a screen, and it turns it into a sign or a full computer. And so we're now having it such that people are now thinking, can I take any paper sign I have and turn it into a digital sign? Rotate through the right promotions at the right time, depending on what inventory I want to push at that particular time. And so one example of this that we're working with is CocaCola. So CocaCola just announced a set of pilots with Albertsons stores. What they're going to be doing is in about 750 Albertsons stores, in the drink aisle, they'll be putting a 10-inch Chrome screen that'll be a Chrome digital sign. They can control that centrally and push out whatever promotion they want to those signs. The other interesting part is that on top of that sign, there will be an Eddystone beacon. And what an Eddystone beacon does is it broadcasts a URL from that particular sign. So when a consumer goes into that drink aisle and says, you know, there's a 2-for-1 special on Coke Zero, they can pick out their phone. They'll have a URL that'll be there waiting for them. They can click on that URL and get that coupon and use it at the checkout stand immediately. And Coke can actually rotate that on a daily or even a minute-by-minute basis, depending on what they want to do. And so it opens up a whole set of new possibilities. The next part of this is, what about the kinds of devices that aren't just mobile devices and go beyond that to things like wearables? So a few examples here. There are things like watches that can be there. There are things like, for example, other types of specialized devices for particular areas, like barcode scanners, various things like that. There is a whole exciting area around things like augmented reality and virtual reality. So think about augmented reality, where if you give that to a field service worker, the phone can actually guide them through a very complicated repair by actually seeing what's there and being able to point out to them exactly what they need to do. Those are things that are now going to be possible with Android. But the exciting thing is all of these devices that we can't even dream of today. And we're preparing for that world as well, too. We have a project called Brillo, which is looking to bring Android and take Android into these types of new devices and give you a platform that can extend to that. And we have a project called Weave that gives you a communication protocol between these devices and makes it so that there's a standard way for data to flow from those devices into the cloud and let you be able to actually make the Internet of Things a reality. So the world of devices, this is kind of where I see things going. You know, this could be the dominant set of devices in 5 years out there. So last thing I want to talk about is the future. This is my daughter, Siona. She just started first grade, as you can see from her little sign. She came to me a few weeks ago. And you know, as many of you guys can relate to, I try to tell her what I do for a living. And she kind of gets that I build computers and phones. But she mostly thinks I just go to meetings all day. But a few weeks ago, she came to me and said, Daddy, can I use a Chromebook? I said, where did you learn about this? She said, yeah, I want to log in with my Google Apps account. I said, oh my God, this is crazy. And so turns out at her school, they have Chromebooks. They use Google Apps for a lot of the things they do. She's able to log in and actually personalize her math lessons or her reading lessons on a Chromebook. She uses a thing called iReady to be able to do math at her own pace. She has this thing called RazKids, which she can use at home to be able to actually read books and read from a massive library of books anytime she wants. Things like that that I never had when I was a kid. And I think about the kinds of things she does. She expects that anywhere she is, she can be able to actually listen to any song that she wants, or that she can say, OK, Google, and be able to actually get any fact that she wants at any point in time. The amazing thing is, you know, 15 years from now, she'll probably be an employee of one of our companies here. 15 years from now, she'll be probably a customer for many of your companies as well, too. We as change makers are building the world for people like her and all of our kids, where the cloud is just intrinsic. It's always there. And so the challenge for us is, how do we make that world take shape? And I think with the technologies that we have and the mindset that all of you have, we can make that happen. Thank you. I appreciate it.